Hello class. Once your thesis statement has been approved, you can go ahead and start writing your paper. And this is to help give you some guidance along that path so that your first draft can be in as good a shape as possible by the time I get it. The first thing you need to do is have a plan for the organization of your paper. If you just start writing stuff on the page, it's going to take a lot more work to push that into the shape it ultimately needs to be in than if you have a plan before you get started. The easiest way to keep track of your plan is to make an outline. Now, this doesn't have to be the sort of elaborate outline with like Roman numerals and capital letters and then lowercase letters and Arabic numerals. Like, it can just be bullet points on a page. All you really want your outline to do is to say, this is what this paragraph is going to be about, and here's some of the things I'm going to talk about in it. As long as you have sort of a hierarchy and an ordering in place, your outline's doing everything that it needs to do. Now, since you're writing a comparison and contrast paper, there are really two main ways to organize this kind of writing. One is called a point-by-point organization. And what you do in that case is you divide your subject into categories, and then you evaluate the differences or similarities in each person or thing in that particular category. So, we'll see this is not the kind of organization we're going to use in the example, so just to give you an idea, say you were comparing two cities for some reason, maybe deciding where you wanted to live or go to college or whatever. You'd say, okay, I want to compare them in the categories of the cost of living there, what kind of things to do there are there, and the climate. And so then in a point-by-point sort of organization, you would compare each of the two cities in each of those three categories. Now, I'm just going to continue writing the fake paper I started writing last time with the thesis statement. So this kind of organization makes a little bit more sense. And this is called block organization. And there's two different ways to do a block organization. One is to do it by differences and similarities. You can discuss all the differences in one section and then all the similarities in another section. And that's probably what's going to make the most sense for our paper. The other thing that would make this a block style of organization is you separate it not by differences or similarities, but by the two things you're comparing. You discuss one of them completely, and then you bring in the other one in the process of describing it, pointing out what's different and what's alike from the first one. So back to our cities example, what that's looked like is you'd talk about all of the different characteristics of city A, and then you'd talk about all of the different characteristics of city B in big chunks, which is why this is called a block organization. I mentioned that, there was only one particular kind of organization that was going to work for the kind of paper I am writing with my fake thesis statement. And that's probably where you should look too. Look at the thesis statement you developed and any revisions that you've made based on my suggestions. And if you did a good job with your thesis statement, there should be a sort of nudge or a push in a certain direction based on your thesis statement. Because remember, the last quality of one is that it hints of how you're going to discuss your topic, what direction you're headed in. And this was the fake thesis statement I came up with last time. Although the ladies of the castle are initially presented as opposites to highlight the power of physical attraction, the similarity between these two demonstrates the power of women to reveal true character. So clearly, I'm going to talk about similarities first, and I've sort of mentioned what the significance of those is, and then differences second. So this sort of block organization based on differences and similarities is what's going to make the most sense. And your organization is going to work best if you do this, if you derive the organization from the thesis you've already written. And this is an example of what an outline can look like. It doesn't have to be super fancy or super detailed. Differences, I'm going to talk about physical appearances. Similarities, I'm going to talk about the power of the lady over Gawain and the power of Morgan over everyone. Your outline will probably be a bit more detailed than this, not just because you're writing an actual paper, but you get the idea. And you start with this, and then you work up these bullet points into fuller paragraphs. Now, paragraphs have three main pieces to them. Two of them are short, and one of them is long. The first one is the topic sentence, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the first sentence of your paragraph. It announces the topic. You'd think that would be easy, but I've got a lot of advice for you on topic sentences, and that's what we'll talk about next. The main chunk of your paragraph, this is going to be the bulk of it, is where you put your evidence from the text and your analysis of that evidence. It's where you make your arguments. It's where you it's where you put all of your interesting observations and information in the middle part of the paragraph. And you should also have a concluding sentence, because otherwise it sort of feels like you've left the reader dangling. You just abruptly got cut off in the middle of your explanation. It lets your readers know, and now I am finished with this topic and ready to move on to something else. So those are the three main pieces that every paragraph of yours ought to have. Now let's look a little bit closer at some of those pieces and what they should look like. The first one is the topic sentence. As I said, it should announce the topic. It should also be clear how that topic relates to your thesis. If that's not obvious, you need to either clarify that in your topic sentence, or your thesis needs to be better. This is an error I often see, using a statement of fact about the story as a topic sentence. And what's usually happening in those cases is a student is saying, well, here's the thing I'm going to talk about in this paragraph, and I'm going to talk about when this happens. But that's not your topic, that's more like an example. So that belongs in the middle of the paragraph. Your topic sentence is, here's how I'm going to explain this thing to you that's part of my thesis, that's part of the argument I'm making here. So make sure you're not just making a statement of fact or telling us about a plot point. And the other problem I often see with topic sentences is that they don't have the right scope for the paragraph. They're either too narrow, and you end up talking about stuff that doesn't fit with your topic sentence in that paragraph, and so your paragraph feels sort of like it's shifting points in the middle. Or it's too broad, and it just becomes vague and not super helpful in helping your readers understand exactly what you're trying to say or prove in this particular paragraph. So to avoid just making generalities, I've included some examples here. Here's an example of a good topic sentence for this pretend paper I'm writing. When the two women appear together, the author deliberately draws attention to their physical differences. It's clear that here I am going to be talking about their physical differences. And I've already said in my thesis statement that this is going to illustrate the power of physical attraction. Some examples of those bad thesis statements that I told you about. Here's what a statement of fact would look like. There are two women who live in the castle, one old, one young. We know that. That is unhelpful as a topic sentence. Here's an example of a thesis statement that's too narrow. The author first points out differences in their faces. That is true, and that belongs in the body of your paragraph, but it's not going to contain everything you want to talk about with this topic about the physical differences between the women. And something that is too broad is there are many differences between these two women. That just contains, it includes everything you could possibly talk about, when really your paragraph is just going to be about physical differences and not all of the different kinds of differences there are. You should have separate paragraphs on the different kinds of differences, if that's what's necessary. Okay, once you've got your topic sentence in place, you can go ahead and check them. You might want to wait until you've got your whole paper written and then go back and check your topic sentences. And that's fine, so this can be sort of the last step before you turn in your first draft. But to see if you've got good, strong topic sentences, the first thing you can do is read just your thesis and just your topic sentences. If you want to, you can even cut and paste them into a separate document. Could this serve as a sentence form outline for your paper? Can you follow the main ideas that you have? Is your thesis fully explained just by doing this? And if you can, you've done a good job with your topic sentences. If you can't, your topic sentences might need to be a little bit more precise and include a little bit more information. Another possibility is to look at the other sentences in your paragraph and make sure that every sentence in that paragraph clearly relates to that topic. And this will keep you from sort of switching midway between topics and keep you from having those too narrow topic sentences that I pointed out before. Okay, after your topic sentence, then is going to come the meat of your paragraph and really the meat of your paper, which is your evidence from the text and your analysis of it. And I like to describe this in a 3-part structure. You should have 3 pieces every time you bring up something from the text. You should first make a claim. This is some kind of assertion or conclusion about what the story is trying to say, what it means, or what the author is trying to accomplish. And then you put in your quote, because a lot of times students will just walk straight into a quotation without any introduction or any context or any idea of what you're trying to do with it. So always start with a claim first and then move on to your specific quotation. And this is going to be language from the text that backs up the conclusion you're trying to say. And then finally, the explanation. This is also a step that often gets left out. Students feel like, well, clearly you can see in the quotation that it does what I said it did. No, you really need to make that connection explicit yourself. Show how the quote supports the claim. Explain why the quotation is significant or important, and interpret it for the reader. You are supposed to be doing the work here, not your readers. So do the work of looking at that quotation and saying, here's how it accomplishes what I said it accomplished. Now let's look at an example. Okay, you can see the color coding is the same. So the part in orange is the claim. The author emphasizes the difference by comparing specific features in parallel sentence structures. Okay, my claim is that he's describing these facial features, and he's using parallel sentence structures to do it. Here's the quote I'm using to prove that. The body of beauty seemed to bloom with blood. The cheeks of the crone were wattled and slack. And I include the line numbers there, although you don't have to worry about that quite yet. And then I explain why it matters and how it's done that these structures are parallel. The first part of each sentence has the same grammatical structure, and the same body part is described, the skin and cheeks. Okay, so that's the explanation piece. And every time you include a quotation, make sure you have the claim, the quote, and the explanation. And sometimes these will be longer or shorter. Sometimes the claim will only be a few words. That's all you need to introduce your quote. Sometimes the explanation will be 2 or 3 sentences if it's a particularly long or complicated quotation. But those are the 3 things you should go through every time you include some evidence from the text. Just a quick note on quotations. It's not super important for your first draft, but keep in mind that you should not include very long quotations. It's just too much to analyze at once. Even if the whole passage is important and you want to look at all of it, you should break it into smaller, sort of more digestible pieces and look at it that way. Generally, I would suggest restricting yourself to no more than 4 lines at a time, and probably less. This is 2. So I think try to keep your quotations about in that range, and if you want to talk about more, break it up into smaller pieces. Okay, the last thing to do, once you've got the whole thing drafted, you've got all your topic sentences in place, you've got all your evidence described, is to make sure your paragraphs stay unified. Paragraphs should have exactly one idea each and develop it really fully. And one way to test this is beside each paragraph in your paper, you can print it out, or you can even do this on your computer if you wanted to. Try to summarize it with a single word or a very short phrase. Just, what is this paragraph about? If you had to sort of jog your memory about it, what would you write down? And if you can't make all the ideas fit into this single word or phrase, you probably have too much going on, and you might need to break it into multiple paragraphs, each with its own topic sentence. But if you find yourself using the same summary for multiple paragraphs, it's possible that they should be combined because they're all really about the same thing. And that saves you having to write a topic sentence. So there's that. Okay, I hope this helps you, and I look forward to reading your first drafts next week.